Let me ask you something. You bought a car, you paid for it, you've got the title, it's sitting in your driveway. Do you own it? You have a tractor, you paid for it in full, it's on your land, you've been using it for cropping, getting your crops out of the field or whatever. But do you own it? You bought a video game, you paid $60 for it, you installed it on your console. Do you own it? You paid for heated seats in your BMW. They're in your car right now. Can you use them? The answer to all four of these questions under the actual legal and technical framework that governs almost all products right now in 2026 is increasingly no. You have purchased the physical object, but you are renting access to its functionality from a corporation that can modify, restrict, or even revoke access to it at any time for any reason, and sometimes with little to no recourse on your part. This is not a growing problem. It's where we are right now, and it's accelerating in almost every aspect of your life. And you need to understand exactly why this matters to you. Let's get into it. Welcome back to The One Row. On this channel, we focus on real practical preparedness to help you and your family be better prepared for whatever the world throws at you. Today's topic fits squarely into the mission of the channel because it's really the erosion of personal property ownership. And it's honestly, I think, one of the most underrated threats that we're facing right now to your family's long-term ability to be self-sufficient and financially independent. Now, if you do find this video helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't, that YouTube stuff really does help out. And if it's helpful, great. If not, don't worry about it. Anyway, but before we get into specific examples of why this is an important topic at the foundational level, I want to kind of explain that for many people, you're kind of uncomfortable with that concept. You've bought the thing, it's in your driveway, but you're paying a subscription fee to use certain features of it. I think we kind of all agree that at a foundational level, there's this odd feeling that gives us, but you may not be able to actually explain why. Now, the founders of this country were very specific when they talked about personal property. John Adams wrote that property is as surely a right of mankind as liberty itself. James Madison argued that the government is instituted to protect property of every sort, and that this security of property is the primary object of civil society. Also, Thomas Jefferson connected personal property directly to human dignity and independence. And across the board, our founding fathers, it was understood that personal property rights were a prerequisite for general freedom. Now, this is not necessarily that complicated. When you truly own something, you are beholden to no one to access it. You can use it, modify it, repair it, sell it, pass it on to your children. The relationship between you and the object is that you own the object. When you are merely licensing access to something, even something that you paid for or something that's in your driveway or the tractor on your land, your access to that object exists as a pleasure of the licensor. That's a fundamentally different relationship than truly owning it. One is ownership, and the other is like tenancy, like you're renting it. And right now, what's happening across almost every major category of consumer goods and technology is a systemic conversion of ownership into this concept of tenancy. And the people and companies forcing this conversion are really counting on all of us to not even notice that it's really happening until it's too late and it's past the point where we can push back. Now, I don't want to get into the conspiracy side of this particularly, but the World Economic Forum, which is the organization that runs the annual Davos, Switzerland conferences you may have heard about, and there's a lot of conspiracy stuff about them, and I'm not really getting into that piece of it, but they have published publicly a vision of the future. They published this back in 2016, but it was a vision of the future that used the phrase, "You will own nothing and you will be happy." And when it was published in 2016, it was basically an idea of what they thought the future would look like in 2030. And increasingly, it looks like they were correct, whether that was a conspiracy of something they planned to get there, or more so that they saw the trend that was happening because of the way companies are really moving forward with this. And it's exactly the direction that pretty much every major technology and manufacturing company is moving towards, because not necessarily because it's a great conspiracy, but because it's really profitable. And this really comes down to understanding the incentive structure here. Selling you a product one time, you go into the store, go into the car dealership, you buy the car one time, you purchase the car, you're not going to buy another car for a long time. But renting you access to that product's functionality generates revenue every month forever that you have that thing. So the business logic is obvious, and the implication for you and your financial independence and self sufficiency are significant, which is why I'm talking about it. Now, to help you understand the scale of the problem, let me give you some examples across different sectors of your life potentially, so that you can see them side by side, so that you start to see the pattern so you don't miss it. Now, the first example is John Deere tractors. John Deere is a massive manufacturer of agricultural equipment here in the United States. And when you buy a tractor from them, you buy the machine and it goes into your field or barn or wherever you store it. But John Deere retains control over the software that runs through their licensing agreement. So the software that's required to make the tractor work, you don't own. You own maybe the physical piece of the tractor, but the software required to run it, you don't. And what this means in practice is that when something breaks on the tractor, you may not be able to fix it. You have to take it to an authorized John Deere dealer who has the proprietary equipment to diagnose the problem and unlock the repair function. Now, this is not a new problem. Actually, farmers have been fighting this for years, and the right to repair movement has made some progress in some states, but ultimately, and some companies are backing off. Like John Deere signed a memorandum of understanding that they would do better with this stuff, but it remains a voluntary agreement. It's not backed by law. There's no legal agreement. It's just them simply saying they'll try to do better. And next is Ring doorbells. Now, most people who buy a Ring doorbell, you may have one on the front of your house right now. They think they're buying a security camera for their home, and in a very narrow sense, you are. You put a camera on the front of your house, but the data that the camera collects of you coming in and out of your house, your driveway, your neighbors walking their dog by, delivery people, Amazon dropping packages off, family members coming and going, your friends, etc. All that data flows through Amazon servers. If you didn't know, Amazon owns Ring. And the problem with that is Ring has a documented history of sharing footage with law enforcement without requiring a warrant and without notifying the homeowner that they're actually sharing that data. They operate a voluntary thing that you may or may not have heard of called Neighbors, where they share this automatically with police departments. And Ring has updated their policies following some pressure and legal scrutiny. Fundamental architecture that allows Neighbors to work is still there. And the footage from your camera on your home still lives on somebody else's servers. And they have proven that historically they will gladly share that with third parties that you haven't consented to share that information with. And then there's video games and what is called digital rights management. Now, you may not care about video games, but follow me here because this is a very, very good example, because it's very, very clear what they've done over really since I was a kid, right? So 20 years ago, you could go buy a video game. You got a physical disc, you owned it, you could play it. You could take it over to your friend's house and plug it into their, or put it in their console, and it would, it would run on their console. You could, when you were done, you could take it back to, GameStop or something and sell it when you were done, or you just keep it on your shelf forever. And if you wanted to, you could pull it back out and plug it into your Dreamcast or your PS1 or whatever. I mean, it would just simply work forever. But today, a significant portion of major video games require you to have a persistent internet connection to even play single player games. That's not because the game necessarily needs it to function, but there's an always online requirement that technically enforces digital rights management. The game, literally every time you turn on the console, checks with the manufacturer's servers to verify that you have rights to play the game. If those servers go offline because the company shuts down, or they just have terrible service, or they go bankrupt, or they decide that they don't want to support the game anymore because it's not profitable because it's really old or something, that they can literally just turn the servers off and your game is no longer accessible, even if you own the disc. The physical disc doesn't matter. It's the digital rights management that's the problem. And this has happened a lot, actually. Multiple games that people have paid full price for, $60, $50, whatever, have become permanently inaccessible because publishers just shut down the authentication servers. And you have no legal recourse because you agreed to it when you agreed to the end user license agreement. Now, I love this one. This one is one that was came out a while back, and it was fairly famous, made the news. But BMW, if you remember this one, they introduced a subscription model for their heated car seats. So you'd buy a car, and it would have heated car seats, but you couldn't turn the heated car seats on unless you paid a subscription fee. And it wasn't just heated seats. It was heated steering wheels, like adaptive cruise control, high beam assist. There was several other things. I don't even remember all of them. But the hardware and capability of all of those things was in the car that you purchased, but it was software locked and required an ongoing payment to be active. Now, one of the foundational principles of building financial stability over a lifetime is the idea of paid off ownership. You work, you save, you make your payments. Maybe you got a loan for something, but eventually you pay it off, right? You own it free and clear. The mortgage on your house, it's paid off and the house is yours. I mean, you still have to pay property taxes forever, but the payments are done at least. And you get a car on a loan maybe, and you pay it off for, 3, 4, 5 years or whatever it is. And you're done paying for the car. I mean, here in Virginia, we have personal property taxes on vehicles where we continue to have to pay individual taxes per vehicle in perpetuity, pretty much. But besides that, right? Anyway, the point is that the idea is, and it's traditionally been that way for, 100, 200 years, that once you bought something, once you paid for it, the thing was yours. And over time, each of those things that you paid off reduced your monthly obligations, and it would decrease your actual budget, your line items on your budget. And over time, your financial position would strengthen. But the subscription and perpetual licensing model that we're starting to see all over the place, it eliminates those milestones entirely because you don't pay off the software. You never pay off the vehicle's features. You continue to have to pay for your tractor to get repaired, instead of using a cheaper independent mechanic. The payment model continues forever, right? And this is not an accident, but it's an explicit business model. This is an intentional thing that many companies are doing because there is a real financial reason, because when you have that recurring revenue, it's predictable. It grows with the customer base. So every time you add a new customer, that revenue goes up, right? Now, the preparedness community has always understood that genuine resilience means reducing your dependency on systems, right? On supply chains, utilities, financial systems, government services. And the encroachment of subscription models into physical goods is creating a new kind of dependency that most people aren't really fully factoring into their preps, right? Or into their dependence on external systems. So what can you do to combat this? One is buy older equipment, buy older tractors, older cars, older fridges. I mean, just buy stuff that are less digital. I mean, it can have some digital, but buy stuff that existed before the payment model affected that thing, right? Next, make sure you're supporting right to repair legislation at the state level, and if it gets to the federal level there as well. This is not a partisan issue. Red, blue, doesn't matter. There is support across the political spectrum for this because it really is affecting independent mechanics, independent business owners, consumers of really, again, across the political spectrum. Next is to read the terms of services before you agree to them. And I'm not saying that you're not going to agree to them, right? Because if you don't agree to them, you won't be able to use the thing that you're trying to use. But take just a minute, look through, find the language where they're really screwing around with you, understand what they're doing, and understand what you're agreeing to before you do it. So at least you're informed about it. And the last thing that I'd recommend you do is to push back vocally, right? Share videos like this one. When you find somebody that's talking about this, share it with somebody else, right? Please, seriously. Talk to your community, friends, neighbors, your book club, your church, whatever, church people, whatever it is. Make the argument in public that genuine property ownership matters, and that when we go back, I mean, we're at the 250th anniversary, right, of the founding of the country, and the founders were right about the relationship between freedom and dignity, and how that plays into actual ownership versus perpetual tenancy. Now, John Adams and James Madison understood something that we are, I think, in danger of forgetting, is that genuine freedom requires genuine ownership. What's being built right now is a world where that foundation is systemically being removed, not through legislation or force, but through terms of service agreements, software architectures, business models, and it's making that dependency be convenient. Maybe that's okay if in some things that you'll own, but let's remember, like, I mean, their goal is that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That's their vision, but it doesn't have to be your vision. I know I say this with every video, but with this one, it really is something I'm passionate about. I think that we really need to get the word out on this one. Please share this video with somebody else. Send it to your family member, send it to some friends. Just help get this message out. And if it's not my video, find another video on this topic where they explain it on the right side of the issue and send that video out. Again, please help get the word out on this one. Anyway, please let me know which of these issues bothers you most. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.